We're here for our latest in our oral history series, and I'm Bill Case, and with me is our videographer, John Clark, and we're here with two folks who are not only very long time residents of German Village, but neighbors of mine, Ed and Barb Elberfeld. Greetings.
Greetings.
Hi.
Glad to be part of this.
Well, it's great to have you, and great to have you as a neighbor. Let's start from the beginning. You folks, I understand, grew up together, high school
We
sweethearts.
did, high school sweethearts, and then we went to college together at Otterbein, and after finishing our studies, we became teachers. But we continued to live in a loft in Westerville, and ironically, we got jobs here in the downtown. Barbara at Roosevelt, which is on Studer Avenue, kind of on the Near East Side here.
Now torn down.
Now torn down.
Yeah.
And myself at Barrett Junior High, which is on Deschler, just adjacent to German Village. And we became very familiar with the bars and the eateries in German Village, though we continued to live in Westerville. Went to Planks and Dibel's and the Bavaria House. And I remember in our younger days, we would go to Planks on High right after school and stay until they closed. And I can't imagine doing that today.
Well, we were with our friends who were teachers, and we remember seeing Esther, the accordion player at the other Dibel's, and probably old-time people around here remember her.
Sure.
And we moved down here. We decided to move down here, to my recollection, when Westerville got one too many traffic lights. They put in a traffic light at the corner of Schrock and Cleveland, which at the time was just a small road, and now it's a major thoroughfare up there. And we decided it was time to move closer to work and get out of the suburbs, because we didn't want to drive 30 minutes a day one way, if you were lucky. So that's why we started looking down here after we got kicked out of our apartment.
Did you both decide together you wanted to be teachers? You knew each other before you made that decision, I take it, or was that?
I don't know.
How did that come together?
We both enjoyed schools and education, and I would say I was encouraged to become a teacher by having a low draft number, and you could get out of the Army by being a teacher, and so that was an extra added attraction. But I started doing that, and I really enjoyed it. So it wasn't even after the war ended, I said, this I could definitely make a career at.
And you were involved as an art teacher in photography?
Art, but since I needed a job right away, we both kind of finished school early and had the opportunity to get hired on right away.
Initially, you were a history teacher.
Yes, history, and I was even teaching English classes because I needed a job right away. And so within a week of graduating, which was actually in December, I was working, and then she graduated in April.
And I got a job the very week I graduated. I became a teacher mostly because of a teacher I had, and I became an English teacher because she was an English teacher, and I really enjoyed her class, and she was the kind of person that made you feel comfortable and enjoy what you were doing, and I think that's why I became a teacher.
But you weren't teaching at the same school?
No.
No. We never did until my last assignment. After I was a supervising teacher for a while, I went back to the classroom, and I was then at Fort Hays, where he was. But we never taught together before that.
Yeah, but I was convinced also that that the automobile was not sustainable. So,
even then?
Back in the 1970s.
What year were you married?
We were married in '69.
Okay.
And then moved to the village. We started looking in '74, and I wanted to make sure I had a house so I could ride my bike to work. And I rode my bike to work every day for quite a long period of time.
There's a story involved with your house search.
Yes, we knew we wanted to live in the village, and so every night after school, we would drive the streets of the village looking for all the houses that were advertised. Virginia Welch showed us a few houses. Pat Phillips showed us a few houses. Pretty much anything that was on the market at that time, because the landlord in Westerville wanted us out. So we're
Should
looking
we tell them why?
Well,
He wanted to move a young lady in. Yes, that's okay.
that's another
No
story.
offense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And you know, so we knew that, and I didn't want to ever have to rent again. So this particular house was attractive to us for a couple of reasons. One is that we are only the second people to have lived in this house.
Well, just so somebody may be looking at this tape years from now, what address are we at?
259 East Beck.
And I would like to put in there that we both weren't convinced at the same time, because I was supposed to write down all the addresses of every house that was available as we drove by them. And I purposely did not write this one down.
Because it looked pretty bad.
Just because of the way the front porch looked and the dirty brick. And I thought, I hope he doesn't see that. And then the next day he went riding around on his bike or whatever,
Right.
or in the Carmangia,
Oh,
I
yeah,
guess, from
right.
school at that time. And he saw it and said, why didn't you write that down?
How old is this house?
About 1910, I think.
Yeah, I think it was built.
And,
And you, just skipping ahead, you became the second owner.
yes,
I understand.
Mr. and Mrs. Weaver. Mr. Weaver built the house. He was the custodian
We were
at
the
Beck
second
Street
people to
School.
live in it.
Second people lived in it. Mr. Weaver died in the late 60s. Mrs. Weaver stayed on till the early 70s.
No, it couldn't have been 70 because we
Well,
moved in then.
No, I know, it's like 1970.
Oh.
And then when she died, the house was empty for 5 years. And a doctor whose name was
I forget.
Hurd bought the house kind of on spec. And,
But they never lived
and they
here.
never lived here, and they kind of put it up for sale. And when we came into the house the first time, a lot of Mrs. Weaver's stuff was still here. They never really cleaned the house out.
What was
And
the condition of the house?
It was in a very rough condition. Like at the south side, the windows had fallen out.
And he replaced the window before we even made a contract on it. We looked in there and he knew he wanted the house and he repaired the window. Another bad thing about the house.
You're not supposed to do that
No,
before you...
I know
I
you're
know.
not. I know, but I thought I wanted to say whatever was
It
there.
turns out that the guy who owned it, you said it was Hurd, I don't know, but his son apparently had a few parties here, and one of the things they did was to sunbathe on the roof by crawling out the bathroom window. And so the only part of our house right now that doesn't have a slate roof is over the porch, because they totally destroyed the slate there, and we as a young couple did not have enough money to replace it with slate. So that's something I'm going to
It's
have
on
to
our
step
list.
on
It definitely is.
to fix up.
But
Now,
back to how you...
yeah, well, we were interested in the house because it had not largely been remodeled or rehabbed. It's very, very old feeling, and most of the houses didn't have that feeling. But the real kicker, as we wandered around the house, looking at a lot of Mrs. Weaver's old belongings, some of her furniture, in the front room I found an old telephone table. And on that telephone table was a Columbus City phone directory flopped open. And it had obviously been open there for the 5 years the house was empty, because you blew on it and the dust went everywhere and the pages were very cracked. And I became fascinated by the fact that this book had just been laying there all those years, and had the shock of my life when I looked and saw our names on an open page. And as soon as
on the one that it was turned to.
the one that it was turned
In
to,
the whole phone book.
and I thought, okay, this is it, we're buying the house. The Weavers have sent us a message that this is the house we should buy. And over my wife's objections, I said, no more discussion, whatever they want, we're buying this house.
The other piece of furniture that was here was her potty chair, because the only bathroom was upstairs, and so she was confined down here at the time. And then when we were later cleaning out an attic or something, we found a little wood carving that she had done. You know, the old,
We still have that.
yeah, where they burn the wood,
Sure.
and a little picture of her, which so that was
Which we which we preserved and we find very precious, because I do feel it's connected to them, because they were school people. They built the house, and
Well,
I do think in a way they sent us a message.
Well,
This is the place for you.
We were told, I don't know if this is true, but we were told that he was the custodian at Beck Street School for many, many years, and that he built a lot of this house himself. So I don't know if that's true, but that was the story that the realtor told us.
You two were typical of many people who moved in that time frame. You did a lot of work yourself.
Yes.
To this house.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
Well, the whole idea was, being a couple of young, poor school teachers, we didn't have the money to hire people to do things. But the great thing about German Village was that a lot of people were rehabbing houses, and there was a lot of knowledge out there. Pat Phillips, one of the realtors, also was doing a lot of rehabbing, and it was very generous at sharing information about, well, here's somebody you should talk to, and this is something you might do. Phil Keats, who knew all about brick, and if I needed to lay some brick or work on some brick, very generous. Never thought about charging us, just said, this is what you can do. And Bob Hurry, who was a builder that's no longer with us also, that was very forthcoming with information. And of course, the kings of supporting young people in the village, Fred and Howard. You could walk into Hausfrau and get anything you needed in terms of information, or even in terms of things you might need for your house, because Hausfrau was in the process of morphing from being an old-time laundromat grocery store into being what it is today, and I can't even explain what it is today exactly.
And you have an example of one particular day of purchases you made
Right,
there that
right.
shows how diverse they were.
Eclectic, let's say. The only place you could get the Sunday Times south of Broad Street was Hausfrau Haven. So I used to go there and get the Sunday Times, and because I had torn our kitchen out and I hadn't replaced it, we needed a little bit of cold milk and a little bit of cold juice. So one Sunday morning I went down to get the milk and the juice, and came back with the Sunday Times, a quart of milk, a quart of juice, and an antique stained glass window, which we still have in our kitchen.
Still in the kitchen.
So I thought, well, this is kind of a crazy place. You can get anything here. And it was kind of true. But the real truth is that they were a fountain of information on, what you needed to rehab in the village, what a village citizen should be about. And it was very much about community. There was a sense that we were in this together, that we're helping each other out, and that we're facing some of the same problems. And they were both very generous, particularly Fred, going to meetings. Fred Holdridge going to city council, going to meetings, making the case for the village at every possible opportunity.
He taught you a little bit about how to be a force in the community.
Yes, I can only hope to, what shall I say, emulate the kind of impact and the kind of shared generosity toward the community that was modeled by Fred and Howard, and by a lot of early residents of the village that kind of picked up that idea of community and created something that was more than just, the brick streets and the brick sidewalks. It was a real sense of, we're in this together.
You can tell about the brick streets, though, but I remember as a young person, believe it or not, I was a pretty shy person at that time. I've grown out of that. But one time I was just walking down the street and Fred just engaged me in talk, and he called me by my name, and I was really surprised that he knew who I was. But he, because I was just kind of new here, and I was kind of like, I don't know what's going on, and I don't know if he sensed that or what, but he engaged me, he knew me, he started to joke around with me, and I was really impressed with that and very surprised. And that's the kind of neighborhood we have now, where everyone knows everyone, and
When you moved in on this block of Beck Street, which is really one of the great blocks of German Village
Yes.
as we sit here in 2013.
Right.
It was a little different in the mid-70s.
Yeah, as we were moving from Westerville to German Village, our friends in suburbia said, well, you can move to German Village, but you got to be on the park. And we said, well, we're looking at a house on Beck Street. They said, worst street in the village. No way. That is a terrible place to live. Nothing is rehabbed on Beck Street, and that was true. The Lindenhof restaurant was there,
Which is Lindy's.
Lindy's now. The Lang Stone Company house had a little bit of minor restoration, but nothing major. I'm not sure when Sandy and Bill Kite moved in, but for the most part, on this block between 5th and 6th, nothing had been rehabbed. I don't know whether it was when we moved in or just before. Fetch Park was kind of a vacant lot.
Very vacant.
And so it was a little strange to be on a street with virtually no restored houses. However, the houses themselves were brick, the streets were brick, the sidewalks. All of the original inhabitants were fairly friendly. Now on Beck Street here between 5th and 6th, there were at least 3 or 4 doubles. Those have kind of
The
changed.
McNeely house was a double.
Right.
And I believe your house was.
Yeah, that might have even been a triple. The
Yeah.
6th and
So a
Beck.
lot of them have been cut up with a lot of families, and so it was a little bit of a different thing. But
A different feel. For sure.
but when someone did move in and started to rehab a house, you had kind of an instant connection with them. You were kind of this camaraderie of, pioneers moving into the prairie and, homesteading almost.
But I think we were fairly naive. We looked around at the house and it had old wallpaper and everything needed done. We were lucky that none of our woodwork had been painted.
You have a picture of some of that old wallpaper,
Oh yeah, there we go.
Yes.
and a lovely young lady sitting there. That might be you just a couple years ago.
Yeah, just a couple. That was in 75, I guess.
All right. And we
he-
see the wallpaper.
and here's
And period piece furniture also.
Yeah.
and there's the wallpaper being removed with the steamer. But I literally, and this is why I say we were naive. This is, you look at the house, you say, well, you have to strip the wallpaper.
And you stripped all the wallpaper in
And-
the house.
Every room.
Yes. And then we had to refinish all of this, and then the floors had to be done, and then, one thing led to another, and you're 20 something, and you think, well, I could never do that now.
Truly sweat equity.
Here I am,
Oh, yeah,
breaking
absolutely.
up concrete on the outside of the house, wearing flip-flops, which, I had long forgotten that picture, and he found it, and I can't believe that I would do something.
If he'd said, get ready to break up concrete, you would have
just-
stopped him cold, wouldn't you, before you bought the house?
Today, no, at the time I was so, out of it that I just, that's what people do.
We'll do it.
I would never do that today because
And let's take a look at this great picture of
Yeah.
the young couple and the, who absolutely kind of look like
That was taken on-
the peace generation right there.
this was taken on the day we paid for the house, which, if I'm not wrong, was a Michigan-Ohio State game that day. Do you recall that?
I do not recall that.
Yes, it was.
It looks like the steps needed a little
Yeah.
refinishing at that.
Everything needed refinish.
Everything in the house.
There was not a square
needed
inch of this
refurb.
house that didn't need some kind of refinishing. But it was just, and we were living in it, of course, which was kind of a pain because we couldn't afford to live somewhere else and
we
fix up
had
the
to-
house. So
and
we
the-
did it room by room.
Yes, but I would like everyone to know that for the first few months we lived here, I had to deal without a kitchen because he needed a dark room first. So the dark room took precedence over a kitchen. So
Yeah.
I had to do dishes in the bathtub upstairs.
I was teaching, but I also had a long time photography business. That's how I worked my way through college, and I continue to do that because it was just necessary to bring enough income in, to do the house. But doing it room by room, I wouldn't recommend, but it was possible. For example, the front 2 rooms here, I remember it's around Christmas time, and it made me think that we got a full 2 weeks off at Christmas.
Yeah.
And so the Friday we got off, we didn't go to Planks that night. We came home and started taking this room apart. Probably started with stripping wallpaper. and stripped the wallpaper and stripped the woodwork and refinished it and patched the plaster, did the electrical wiring. This is not necessarily in order. Redid some of the window work, rehung lamps and electrical. There was no plumbing in these two rooms. Fixed the sliding doors, and then eventually repainted. And I remember at the end of the 2-week vacation, the morning we were to go back to school, I got up early so I could put the switch plates back on the rooms. So we had basically 1 hour off on Christmas Day, and every other hour was spent just doing 2 rooms. And so it was very gratifying to get that done. But she's right, we'd never do that again. And it did take a certain amount of pioneer spirit to address
it took a naivete,
stupidity probably is a better word.
Because we, obviously we weren't doing the kind of job that really this house deserved to have done. And then over the years you hire someone to come back and fix your mistakes.
Well, I think this room was pretty much done at the end of those 2 weeks.
Well,
But yes, we have benefited from outside help a lot. Particularly in the later years.
In addition to all your work that you were doing rehabbing, you got involved in a kind of a fun act of civil disobedience with Fred Holdridge.
Well, I hope you'll get some confirmation on this from other folks more closely involved. But I do remember that there was a desire to try and get the city to fix up the brick streets. And they seem very resistive to this. So hopefully you've heard this story. Fred Holdridge decided to plant a tree in a pothole in front of Lindy's. And I think he probably alerted the press, the TV, came down and he planted the tree. And of course that's right down the street from us. So we were kind of amazed that, that someone would pull such a wild stunt. But it flooded the papers, it flooded the news. And the city, I think it was during Buck Reinhardt's administration, I remember his service director, I think her name was Gilsa Rosenblum or something like that. Rosenbaum.
I don't know.
At any rate, her statement was that, we could maybe asphalt over the bricks, but it's just too expensive, particularly in a slum area, to rehab all these bricks or restore all these bricks. So the next step was to literally block off the street out here, Beck Street, and the neighbors gathered. I think it was on a Saturday morning. I think under the direction of course, with Fred and Howard there, but Phil Keentz, who was a brick expert, pulled up all the bricks, reworked the bed, tamped it down, did all the gravel work, and began relaying the brick streets. And I thought to myself, this is amazing. We're in the neighborhood where you not only have to rehab your house, you have to also rehab the sidewalks and the streets.
Well, plus absolutely illegal to be prying up bricks on a city street.
I know, illegal, but we were pirates. I told you, we were pioneers. And so the idea of a kind of wacky civil disobedience really appealed. And I think it came down to humbling the city into doing something, because they were either going to have to arrest half the residents of German Village for repairing their own streets or cave in. And I remember...
what did they do? I don't
They finally came to some kind of agreement, and that was after, and I'm pretty sure she didn't actually say this, that the service director was quoted in the paper, that the headline was, "Let them eat bricks."
Yeah.
So that was probably the wrong thing to say. And it led to a kind of a tacit, what shall I say, peace treaty, in which they would now agree not to fill in any holes with asphalt or concrete, and to begin to set aside some funding for rehabbing the brick streets. And I think that kind of continues to today.
Beck Street right now has some pretty big dips in it, but I wouldn't trade them.
Time for some more tree planting?
Yeah, it is. It's time for some more tree planting, but I also am really glad that they preserved the brick streets. It just is so
It's
nice.
become kind of emblematic of German Village, the streets and the sidewalks. And so, but it also, that kind of thing led to just even more intense feeling of community and neighborliness, because we had been through this kind of turmoil together. And I think I think that continues today. Not the turmoil, but the sense that there is nothing that the residents of German Village can't do if they don't put their mind to it.
And I think that Fred used to say also that it was important to do good, but you had to have fun doing it. And he always made these kinds of things not only, I mean, it was civil disobedience, it was also fun.
I'm pretty sure there were balloon flamingos floating around while we were working. I'm not sure if they were there, but they were somewhere nearby.
Well, whatever. So
another interesting aspect of living where you do is you have commercial establishments just down the street, and you did behind you as well, right?
Right, and that in the early days of the village, and I guess the 70s were the early days, although the 60s were the real early days. But there was an issue as we first decade or so that we lived here about, would German Village become a kind of a commercial area with lots of shops and lots of neighborhood boutiques for people to come and visit, or would it be more of a residential neighborhood? And that tension existed then and exists to a certain extent today. And I think there were smart people who led the German Village Society that were very sensitive to how historic neighborhoods evolve and how they grow, and that there is kind of an ideal mix. Now, we can continue to debate what that mix is, but if it kind of swings one way or the other, the businesses will drive out residents, and if there are no residents, then the businesses won't sustain themselves. So there is a kind of a mythical mix there, and we kind of saw this evolve right on this street, which included a mixture of businesses and residences.
What was behind you?
Behind us, I think in the 50s, heavy industry moved into the village. It was, a downtrodden area, maybe the 40s and 50s. And so there was actually heavy manufacturing. The CAS Gear Company, which made machined gears for heavy machinery, was located there in an industrial building. And then that became a refrigeration company. And also on Lear Street behind us was Franklin Plating and Polishing, which used heavy corrosive chemicals to polish, commercial polishing. And the building down the street was the Dispatch Printing Company's storage for rolls of paper, and so the big dispatch trucks would roll up and down the street. And this eventually, because of more and more residents moving in, and the fact that, frankly, the property values became greater, so that Franklin Plating and Polishing gave way to a set of a dozen houses. The gear company here, building was taken over by Franklin Art Glass. And
which is still there.
And
they're a good neighbor.
They're a good neighbor. In fact, they built a stained glass window for us.
Yes,
and literally carried it around the block and installed it. They never put it on a truck, which is pretty fun. And then there were other things.
Didn't have to go freight on.
Didn't have to go freight. And they've done other work for us too. And then the Wayne Popcorn Company, which was a industrial building. It was up on Jackson. You wouldn't know. I'd have to point out and say,
even I don't remember.
This is
that
an industrial building that's now a home. And the Frame Shop, which is also on Jackson, now is a beautiful one-story home. So many.
Was it a popcorn company when you moved in?
It was a popcorn company, and it was kind of interesting. There were scattered throughout the village lots of examples of industrial buildings, and many of them have very, very artistically and very seriously be converted to residences. I mentioned earlier the Dispatch Printing Company garage, which then became retail planning and became Ballet Met, and now it's a set of condos which are fabulous. And the architects have been smart enough, and the society, particularly the German Village Commission, has been wise enough to say, let's keep the original historic aspect of this. So we have this great mix of buildings, of resident houses and former industrial buildings, all of them kind of creating this incredibly diverse and interesting urban environment.
And I think probably everyone that you interview says the same thing. I've lived here so many years, and every time I walk down this or that street, I see something different. And that's literally true. And I've lived here over 40 years, and I'll walk down a street and I'll see something. I say, wow, that's nice, or that's unusual. And that doesn't happen in suburban living very much. I also remember the place where the book loft is now being a small bookshop and many other little, there was a jewelry shop, a candy shop, and all kinds of other businesses there. The book shop itself was only one small part of it originally. And
the streetcar barn was a little shopping place.
Yeah.
So it took a while to sort out that mix of residences to businesses. And of course, a lot of this was ameliorated then, this kind of conflict, when the brewery district was started, because that was clearly a place where businesses could set up and thrive. And for example, the Beck Tavern across the street here was a very loud and popular bar, and there were conflicts with the bar and the neighbors. And when the brewery district started, the owners decided, well, we'll just take the bar down to High Street. It became Victory's. It continued to be a very popular and loud bar, and we loved the owner and we loved Victory's, but it then turned back into being a very quiet neighborhood establishment.
But there was a little conflict.
There was a little conflict there, but I think that neighbors came together, and at one point even
Old Beck Society,
Save Old Beck, the
Beck.
SOBs, and kind of threatened to maybe vote that precinct dry. And I think they kind of got the idea that they were either going to have to work with the neighbors, which they tried to do for a while, or else ultimately, move to an area in which they would not have such a detrimental impact. But we're very happy now that the bar didn't go away completely. We're very happy with the evolution of the Sycamore Cafe. We're very happy with the fact which just reopened.
Right.
That was another neighborhood bar, and I would have hated to see that become another residence, because it is so great to be able to walk to Lindy's. We have a huge snowstorm on right now as we're filming this. We ate together last night at the Sycamore, and tonight I said to Barb, we won't have to worry about getting in the car, we'll just walk down the street. And that's really one of the terrific things. So while this is principally a residential area, we are very much appreciative of the high quality businesses that have remained here.
The two of you taught until what year?
I taught until 2000, and I've been retired since then. And you too?
I taught until 2004, and the great thing about retiring was that it then gave us an opportunity which we didn't have when we were working, to begin to get more involved, in the community.
And you certainly have.
Well, we've tried to. While we always went to the tour of homes, that's when we started doing pre-tour dinners every year. And while we certainly were members of the society, that was when we started joining committees.
And perhaps giving a little more money.
And perhaps, able to give a little more money.
Yeah,
and that's when I got interested, because I had been here a while, in the future of the village, and joined the Long Range Planning Committee.
And that led to a historic achievement on your part.
Well, it's not an achievement on my part. The chairperson was Carol McCall, and the members of that committee recognized that they needed to think about how to support older adults living in the community, how to keep them in the community. That led to the creation of Village Connections, which is going to launch next month and help keep older adults living in their homes in the community, and help keep the housing stock up also. And I think back to people like Mrs. Weaver, who lived here in this home, didn't have a lot of support, and I think back to other folks who've lived in the community and maybe had to move out when they got to be a certain age. We don't want that to have to happen, and I think we've got a groundbreaking and strikingly different initiative and way to deal with this issue. But out of that same committee, and I'm not applauding myself, I'm applauding the work of the chair and the other members, also the STAY group, which is designed to help keep younger people in the village by working with the public schools, trying to keep the point where, you know, if you come to the village and have kids, you don't have to leave when they reach school age. And so now Stewart School is going to become a neighborhood school again, and we are all, including everyone, going to try and make that a really terrific school for German Village kids. And then the third initiative, because there have always been a large mix of rentals here, we are right now reaching out to rental residents. So this is still in its formulation stage, December of 2013, but I do think that initiative, since about half of our residents are rental residents, and that millennials are going to be important to the future of the village, to keep those people here and encourage them to locate in the village.
I would like to jump in on that for just a minute. Your house, right, directly across from me, I can distinctly remember as being the first time that a young couple with a young child moved in here, because we didn't have kids in the neighborhood. It was mostly older people and retired people, and I thought that was really nice. They were young professionals, but they didn't want her going to their daughter going to Columbus Public Schools. And, you know, I understand it.
We're teachers, so we are not naive about this.
Yes, we're not naive about it. And it was a little rougher back at that time. This was in the mid-70s. And they later left, and we didn't see very many kids here. And I am so happy now that Columbus Schools has improved. We have the initiative with the stay initiative. Well, with the schools specifically, so that young kids going here will be able to go to Stewart and not have to be in a lottery or something else, and encouraging that the younger people to come and stay with their children is so important.
A little bit back more toward the neighborhood school.
Yeah, right.
Yes, it's
right.
really great.
Kind of back
I'm really
to the
happy
future.
with that. Yeah.
Well, the Society's proud of the efforts of the Long Range Planning Committee that has led to all of these measures. Ed, you are modest about your achievements with Village Connections, but I would like you to elaborate a little bit on what role you've played in helping that get started.
Well, Village Connections, which is a nonprofit, membership-based organization, enabling older adults to basically stay in charge of their lives and remain in their homes. And the idea came from the Long Range Planning Committee, and we did a lot of research looking at the village movement in general. There are now 220 of these emerging villages in the country, in 39 states and 4 countries, a model for older adults to remain in the community by having a group like Village Connections organize volunteers for minor home maintenance, for yard work, for rides to the doctor, and then also having a list of vetted service providers so that electrical work, plumbing, home health care can be provided, and also more importantly, and very importantly, having a rich menu of health, education, and wellness activities so that people will remain connected, you know, as they live in their homes, which is very important. And it has found fertile ground in German Village because there is a rich tradition of volunteerism here. Many people have come forward and said, you know, sure, I'll help with this. I'll volunteer to help out with somebody's yard work. And there is a rich tradition of, you know, kind of not only preserving, you know, the housing stock, but preserving the folks who live in it, in a sense.
But it was pretty much a full-time job for you for 2 years to get your nonprofit status and to kind of take various committees together to...
A lot of work from the board, a lot of work from the committee, but I'll say this.
Okay.
It is kind of a cliche, but if you were the beneficiary of so many people helping you out, as we were when we first came to the village, you know, sadly, Fred and Howard are gone. I cannot do anything, you know, to thank them except pay forward, try and carry that tradition of helping others which we were taught by the early founders of the village. So it's not some kind of crutch or burden. It is just the culture of this neighborhood, which is as important or more important to preserve than, I would say, even the housing stock.
And you've taken a big step just in the last month by hiring your first executive director.
A big step and an important one, because we're going to launch next month the Village Connections, and this is a person who knows a lot about older adults and knows a lot about running nonprofits, unlike myself. And so I'm very happy to kind of hand over the day-to-day operations of the organization, and now the board will become more of an advisory role.
But you've learned a lot about how these types of operations work. You've had to and have been successful in obtaining grants.
Yes, we have, but I think it's an idea whose time has come. I think that the baby boom generation are probably not going to have a later life course like those in the past. They're better educated, they're living longer and healthier, they've traveled the world, they have much a greater variety of experiences, and so the idea that our cohorts will go quietly off to some cornfield to live out their later life is probably not going to happen. And the village movement grew out of this idea that we would like to stay in our homes, we would like to live in an interesting, vibrant urban environment like German Village, like the downtown, and the technology, not just medical technology, but the technology of communications and support has enabled folks to live a life at home which is way better than they might find in an assisted living situation. Mm-hmm. And so it's coming about at the very time when it's needed. And I'll say also that my neighbors are stepping up at the very time we need them too, because if it was just me sitting at my dining room table here, not a lot would have happened. Right. Time after time, as I've reached out to people, they've said, sure, I know something about this, I'll help out. And it's been really terrific.
German Village has a lot of really smart people living in it. Yes. That with a huge variety of backgrounds that has made your job easier.
That is true, and I think the people in the aging community believe that this model that we are developing, we are going to replicate across the city and across the state. Kind of in the same way that, historic preservation kind of grew in German Village and then became very popular in other communities. We set the model. As well. Yeah, and so I think in a way, we're kind of pioneering in this particular model as well. And I do think that that's one of the great things about it. It's not just, to serve German Village, Schumacher, Marion, the Brewery District and downtown, but also to replicate itself in other communities in the city and other places around the state. I'm going out and speaking to these different communities, hoping that they will replicate this model. But the best way to demonstrate the model is to have a successful one working, and we're looking forward to that.
Well, one thing I learned, having been president of the society for 2 years, is that when these initiatives come about, Village Connections being one, but you've mentioned several of the other ones, the first blush on these things may be, gee, that sounds like it's going to take a lot of work and kind of far-fetched to think we can really bring that about. But in German Village, these things happen because people do have this history coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do. And as I said earlier, I think that if this community decides to do something, they will make it happen. All you have to do is watch carefully on tour day and see the symphony of activities that go on, the people who are meshing almost magically to pull that off. I don't know how many volunteers there are, but it's got to run into the hundreds, and they're all working like this amazing machine and joyously and happily creating this incredible event. And you watch that happen once and you think to yourself, boy, is this an incredible place or what?
I've got to say that as a young person, this person who moved
this person right here,
who moved in here, this was a convenient place to live. It was an interesting place to live. There was a sense with some of the founding people of community. But to me, in the last 15 years or so, it has, and maybe it's just because I'm retired now, I don't know, but it originally was a nice place to live and convenient to work, and now it's a place that I would never want to leave because I feel like I actually have family here in my friends. And that's something I didn't feel when I first moved in, but that's kind of grown into that. And it's been really nice.
That segues into my final question for both of you, and I didn't prepare you for this one.
Okay.
You can speak from the heart. What has living in German Village for these 40 years meant to you?
Well, for me, from the first day we walked in this house, I felt at home.
I didn't.
Okay. I felt, there's kind of a funny term, feng shui, which is about, is this place right for me? Well, I had that feeling right from the get-go. And I'm not just talking about the house itself, but the street, the neighborhood. It felt very much at home. And it's meant that we could walk or ride a bike versus being in a car hours and hours every day. It meant that we never really had much of a mortgage because we bought a very cheap old house that hardly anybody wanted. And pretty much pretty much we're able to fix it up just kind of on our own, so we never had to carry that big burden, and that we were able to have kind of a built-in network of friends and supporters, in this neighborhood. And this has meant a lot to me. Your neighbor is not just, the couple across the street or next door. You've got like 200 acres of neighbors. And that's very, 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 very comforting and very, very supportive. And I think that has meant a lot over the years.
Yeah.
How about you, Barb?
Well, I sort of already answered that question, but I guess, and maybe it's just because I was a young, naive person when I moved here who had grown up in the suburbs. And so it was a little bit of culture shock to me to come into a place where, people of Appalachian background were there, or Black people were there that, I was not familiar with, but they still, it was like I learned that everybody is the same, and that I don't know how to say this exactly. I think I became a better person, a more well-rounded person, and my experiences have broadened how I see the world. And
we benefited from the diversity, not just of German Village, but from the urban core, which is something that.
And when I didn't grow up with that,
yes,
now I'm saying it was kind of shocking at first, but it did not take me long to realize that nobody's going to bite your head off, and you don't have to be afraid of this person or that person, and really. A lot of my fun memories are of some of the older folks. Because I was, never lived around older folks, and what they were like, and talking to them and hearing about their backgrounds, and it was all new to me. So it's grown over the years. It's grown into more and more and more of a family, which is important to me. We don't have children, so.
This is your family.
This is my family.
You are our family, whether you like it or not.
Pleased and privileged to be such. Well, thank you so much. This has been a great interview, and you've both done a lot, and will continue to do much more, I'm sure, to further your legacy here in German Village. So thanks so much.
Okay.
Well, thank you. It's been fun.
Unless you had any questions. Okay.
Well, all right.
Great. I think we